Hi, and welcome back. We're still here with Disruptive Diner, Cloudsourcing creative projects in the 21st century. So we just heard a great story from Bev Hacker of KDHX on how they started a distributed film contest and what that was like and why that was good for their organization, and then ultimately why they needed to divest that and let that live on its own. Next, we've been talking about collaboration, and I've jokingly been telling everybody that we don't frequently think of developers and programmers as the most collaborative or social of creatures. And I think we're giving them an unfair shake, and we actually have a couple in the room here, and I know there's some others listening in. The nature of collaboration is what's the give and take, and how can you use what each other are doing and build on it. And it turns out that actually some of the people that are actually setting this pace for us in that space are programmers and developers. So if you don't know how computer programming works, it used to be that a programmer had to sit and work linearly, line by line by line in code, and create something. And now they're actually using a whole repository of capturing each other's code, borrowing from each other, giving each other notes and feedback, and actually essentially copying each other's homework and actually letting each other build on them. And there's a whole set of social norms that have emerged around that are now transferring to other places in the real world. So before we have this idea of some pasty developer stuck in a cube that's antisocial, that just buy him pizza and he'll do everything, let's take a look at what we can learn about collaboration from somebody in that space. So Kyle, once again, is going to be presenting with the Pachachkacha format, which means that Kyle is presenting 20 slides and they advance every 20 seconds. So we cut him some slack. We do that so that it comes across inspirational. He's going to cover some cool topics, and we're going to get to some great conversation. Kyle is CTO, right? And
CEO.
CEO, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And probably CTO also.
Yes.
Yeah. Of Campfire, a local software company, and he's doing some great work. He's going to talk about collaboration in code and what we can learn from that space. So here comes Kyle. You ready?
Yep, let's go. All right, as Dan said, my name's Kyle Richter. I do work for a company in Hazelwood, Missouri called Meridian Enterprises. I'm a senior engineer over there. I also am the CEO of Campfire Studios. We do a lot of different cool things using some of these cool technologies that I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Some of the projects that we've got coming down the line, PawfitConnections.com, you guys might want to check out. It's pretty neat. Anyway, so I want to talk to you guys a little bit about coding and how, are we moving here? Doesn't look like it's...
Didn't start.
Nope.
We're going to temporarily stop. Start Kyle over.
This is the modified to top.
Find out why. Oh, that's why. It's not actually. You get an extra few seconds.
All right, great. All right, so we work a lot with a lot of different companies, so it's very important that we collaborate with everybody that we're working with. And many times, like for instance for Profit Connections, our clients aren't in the same area that we are. Our client for that project is in Texas, so we don't always have the opportunity to work with somebody right in front of us. But we still need to be able to be efficient and have that level of interaction, that level of collaboration that really creates good products. She came to us with the idea, but it was our point to make that happen. Now, this is a black box, and this is the way that IT is generally viewed, right? Like you throw things into the black box, things come out. That's what happens, right? This is a normal developer, right? You look at a developer, generally you look at them like, they're grumpy old men, they just want coffee, feed them coffee and put them in a corner and they'll work and they'll do things. But actually what we've determined is that's not actually what's best to create good products. So we can't just simply have a Milton and him just be doing his own thing, siloed off in his own cube, and make it work, right? We really got to have people working together. We have to have, people interacting, and Yomi's idea, interacting with my idea to make sure that it creates a better idea, right? Because the fact of the matter is 2 heads are better than 1, and 1,000,000 heads in the cloud are better than 1 head, obviously. So it just works. So we're not going to have any black boxes. That's what we determined. No more black boxes. We want everybody working together, and we want it to be a social thing, right? We want people working together creating the best products possible, and that's why startups are so successful these days, is because they have new ideas. They have new ways of looking at things. This is me, right? Me being social. So that's kind of the point. Not all developers are the segregated, introverted type personalities. It's about getting them interacting with other people, getting them working on technology and using technology that's available to contact somebody and work with somebody in Maine when I'm in St. Louis, or whether it's not even nationwide. Maybe it's in another country. I could work with somebody in Malaysia, right? So technology is really moving us in a way that we are able to do that. Right? So by using things like GitHub and presenting a normal format that they're used to, this is a newsfeed, by the way, we can really make people, even though we're pulling them outside of their comfort zone, working with people, in an introverted personality, using like a newsfeed that they're familiar with. Everybody uses Facebook, right? Giving them an interface that they're used to allows them to interact, even when they normally wouldn't do that. So you end up with pair programming or agile technologies that really push people to create better code, to create better products, which is ultimately, from a business stance, what we want, right? We want to create the best possible product that we can, be the most efficient that we can. And by using technology such as GitHub and allowing us an interface to speak with our management and coders all over the world, we really allow that to happen. Like, for instance, here I've got comments on a task, and I've also closed and put individual tickets in for what I've actually done. I've closed the task from within my commit, so I can work on the code and not work on something else that somebody else is good at, right? This is an example of a manager, right? So by allowing us an interface to view these things that is more comfortable and more easygoing and easy to understand, managers can also get involved in the process. So now it's not just a matter of developers working on a project and being segregated from everyone. By creating an interface for people to use for things that they normally wouldn't understand, like this is a data set, but GitHub is rendering that as a map with data points on it so that management can go in and view what that data actually looks like, or what that interface looks like. So what we really provide is, say, a guitar player in the United States could work with a drummer or a singer in Russia, right? So I can check in my code sample, or for instance, my music clip of me playing, and have a resource there that is really a method for controlling the version of things. So if I check in one version of my guitar solo, a singer or a drummer in Russia could add in his piece to it, and we have different versions of that we can now compare against, right? This is what we want. We want people working together, and the end result, really what we want is, like I said, to create products that at a rock star. We want a rock solid project, right? We want a rock show. That's our business model right there. That's what we want. And really, to do that, we have to create the search for talent, right? We have to really find good talent. And to be honest with you, it's a little bit difficult, right? So we have to come up with interesting ways to present this search to pull people in. And this isn't only in application development. This happens everywhere, in every industry, right? Whether it's you searching for a wedding planner for your wedding, right? You have to have the best talent to do what you want, right? So here, I have Hanny here is commenting on a specific line of my code, right? He's commenting on the code saying, hey, this is a specific instance where I see that you could improve it, right? And by using this method, he's able to do that very easy, even though he's in Sweden, right? So the ultimate point here is that the more people you have working together, it creates one better individual, right? So a code base that I work on may be good, and it may get me started, but I ultimately need the top talent, or the best talent I can get and all of us work together, ping ideas off of each other to make sure that we end up with the best product. So we allow, by using a GitHub or Beanstalk or really any other technology that's out there right now, we really provide an interface for that to happen that we normally wouldn't have. We're commenting on a specific line of code here. I'm telling why I made that decision, why I created that code that way. And by doing that, it really allows us, it doesn't matter what we're working in, whether we're working in coding or whether we're working with any other industry, we can tie all of those things together just simply by using these technologies that are now available that weren't available 10 or 15 years ago.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. We've got a few questions for Kyle that have come in already. Undoubtedly, there'll be more. So, first of all, how did you come to this? So did you have another way of working that you gradually moved to this style? Because obviously, you're a young guy, but there's a lot of people probably that have been developers for a while that there's been a migration. Can you talk a little bit about what you think that process is for somebody that's not familiar with it?
Absolutely. And just so you know, I worked for a company a long time ago, Lord & Taylor, and they were still using mainframes on old programming in COBOL. Everybody came in 9 to 5. They worked on their one job that they were going to work on that day, and they didn't really talk to anybody. They had that one task that was going to take them a week to do, and they worked on it, and they worked on it alone for the most part, other than interacting with their architect or whatever who gave them technical documents. That's how they worked. They didn't really have an input about, or they weren't really engineers, right? We look at software developers now, and they're less developers and more engineers because they're playing a part in actually building software, designing software. And that's really the place that we came from. Back in the 70s, the 80s, and even today, there's still some of that left over. But it was really segregated. It was all about, hey, this is that black box I was talking about. I throw things in, things come out, even between developers. Many times developers, you'd work in the same department with somebody and not even know they were there, right? So that's really changed over time, though. People have started to realize that getting more people involved in the process, doing code reviews, getting people working together really ends up solving a lot of those problems.
Cool. Question came in, how do you prevent man-in-the-middle attacks on the interface and poison ponds from the help at large? And you might want to explain for other people what those, what
okay, so
was alluding to.
You generally had, it's hard to explain that actually, but to be honest with you, like the man-in-the-middle attack is basically you have somebody in the middle that's getting in the way, right? Like you have two sides that are trying to work together, and you have somebody in the middle that's really just causing it's creating it's causing that collaboration not to work very well, right? And
you have a fifth wheel.
Yeah, exactly. And this actually solves, for most business models, that problem, because the more people you have working together on a project, the less significant one bad egg is in that process, right? So like if you're segregated and you're working on one piece of code, then you mess it up, and nobody's really, interacting with you and telling you that's bad, then it's going to be bad, right? Whereas if you have 4 people working together or 2 people pairing together, working on the same piece, and I'm doing something bad, my pair can tell me no. That's not really what you should be doing. And we can revert to the code back to a previous version by using these code review standards and cause those things to be nipped in the bud before they're ever really a problem.
So you're talking about a combination of things. So you're talking about pairing and the agile methodology,
yeah,
and also the tool like a GitHub. They all work together, but you can't just say GitHub is going to solve all of our problems.
Absolutely not. That's always a problem that you're going to have to you're going to deal with. But GitHub really, it kind of leans towards that agile methodology, right? Like, why would you use a social network to share your code and to work on your code if not to be agile and work with other people in a very granular project level?
Another question, are you familiar with the software craftsmanship movement, and how do you think this relates?
I'm actually not familiar with that.
Does anybody in the room know what that is? Okay, well...
I'll have to look it up later, though.
So one of us will look it up here. Software craftsmanship. In the meantime, what other questions do you guys have?
Are there currently any sites like GitHub that have a computer algorithm in the middle that's checking your code to make sure maybe there are problems?
Not that I've heard of, but that's actually kind of if you could find a way to make that happen. The problem is that code is by nature is an interface to humanity, right? Like with code, you have to have a human there to create that, right? That's kind of the whole problem. You can do some generating if you're generating background files for views or something like that. You can do that, but it's a little bit difficult. The real problem is people solve problems, computers don't solve problems. Somebody very intelligent, much smarter than I am, once said actually that programmers are playwrights and computers are horrible actors. So if you don't tell them exactly what to do and how to do it, they will just simply not understand. And so you really need the human element there. If you create a method for generating code like that, it really defeats the whole purpose.
So was in response to the question cut out. You're watching the live stream. That question was, does anybody have anything that's mediating? So any kind of algorithmic mediation to check what you're doing in the midst of the thing. So my question, go ahead.
I know every instance is different, but I know understandably a lot of costs are in the testing and debugging phase. I don't know whether or not a GitHub has unique tools in the pre-planning stage, which usually helps with that, helps reduce any ultimate mistakes or any extra focus there. So I don't know if you had any unique tools just within GitHub to facilitate that area.
Well, GitHub by nature really solves that problem by itself, right? Like the real problem with testing and debugging is the fact that you've already gone through your development phase, and now if you have to go from testing back to development, that's a very costly maneuver, right? By creating an interface where people can really discuss their code and fix those problems by having multiple eyes on the code at the same time or simultaneously while in that development process, you spend less time in the testing and debugging phase. But yes, it has issue tracking built in, and there are a number of different websites that do this stuff. GitHub is just one example, but there's also Beanstalk. There are a number of different websites out there that do this exact same thing, and the reason it's being used is not only is it very simple to use and everyone along the software development lifecycle can participate, it's also has a way of solving problems throughout that process.
So time for one last question for you, and I'm going to ask you to repeat this because this microphone may or may not be going through, but the software craftsmanship movement is this manifesto that people are kind of committing to high quality software that works from the beginning, that taking a point of pride in it. I just Googled it, so it appears to relate to quality. So can you talk a little bit about how this relates to quality and personal accountability?
Sure. The question was, the software developer, or the craftsmanship movement is a method for people to take ownership of a project and to really get into it and work on things where they have committed from the very beginning of solving a problem and having a working solution early. And GitHub really helps you. I truly believe it helps you with that. Just simply from the standpoint of GitHub also provides you an interface to see trending, what projects people are currently working on, right? So it's really one of the things that is really vaulted the open source movement, which is very similar to the craftsmanship movement that you described, in that it allows people who are passionate about something, who want they want to use their skills to help other people and to create better products. It allows them to go to a central place or have a central place where they can go to and find projects that they want to work on. And by doing that, you really create that emotional tie, that commitment that you want to give to a project, to work on it and have the best available products available to you.
Cool. One last question really quick. Can you give a sense of, is there any sense of any ownership of code? Do we start running into problems where people's feelings are hurt, or that there's, turf battles over who owns something if they're sharing all this stuff back and forth? And
absolutely. I mean, that's always a problem with developers. Generally very introverted but very aggressive personalities. It's kind of hard to explain. But yes, I mean, anytime, like, developers have their code, and their code is generally their baby, right? That's a piece of technology that they've spent a lot of time on, that they've worked very hard on. And to have somebody else come along and rip on it or dig on it is not the easiest thing to go through. But it becomes second nature as time goes on. You start to look at it less as a dig and more as a method to improve you as a person. It's all about development, right? Like, people want to be the best they can be, and once you once they understand that that's the goal, then that constructive criticism, if it's constructive, it doesn't always end up that way. If it's constructive, actually ends up making everyone better. So.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break and come back to John Tenyus, who's going to talk to us about, we've kind of laid the groundwork for why this works as an organization to think collaboratively, why it works for individuals, and now John is going to take us through what works as he takes us through some performance to look at some really amazing things that are happening in the world of performance that are happening collaboratively. So thanks again, Kyle.
Yep.